college girl finds herself in a situation, she says, that her roommate comes in. On her way to her dorm, she stopped for a drink from the vending machine. She tapped the button to check the price, and a drink came out of the dispenser. She pushed the drink button again, and the machine dispensed another soft drink. She never even had to put money in. Their loss, our gain. She's pretty excited, has gathered a few people in the hall to get their coolers and make their way to the basement. After checking to make sure no custodial staff were around, they succeed in almost filling a cooler or two with soft drinks. They plan to sell them and use the profit for a friend's night out at the end of the semester. After all, a friend's night out for some of us would be good. Some of my friends are working to get through school and haven't been out to eat all semester. I myself would not have done it, but it's not my job to tell the vending people someone didn't program the machine right. Plus, they overcharge for those drinks anyway. As much as we pay for tuition, it makes me pretty mad they gouge us on snacks and drinks. I thought about telling the residence hall staff, but I figured that if I said anything, my friends would figure out it was me. It's not my problem. I should probably keep my mouth shut. Okay, there's our case study. From that case study, we talked through all of the red warning flags that were in this case study, signs of sin, signs of wrong thinking, signs of wrong behavior. What are some of the things that we identified as root causes for this kind of behavior? There was one key idea. Do you remember what it was? We call it the fear of man. And I like this case study because the initial thought you might be tempted, and all of us really are, if you're thinking about it, as a fruit issue of, hey, she's stealing, so we ought to teach her not to steal. Well, that's only part of the problem. She's only stealing because at the time, that's what gains her approval, or she's agreeing to this process. Her main concept in her mind is a fear of man issue. So the fruit obviously is her deception, her willingness to do all these things, she knows that it's wrong. She's making excuses for what she's doing. She's making irrational arguments, things like that. Any other comments on this, on what causes the root and the fruit issue here? Any other comments on what you talked about last week? Things you remember you want to pitch in that I'm missing? I know I'm kind of skipping over the top here. Yes, ma'am. Right. Yeah, what are you doing?
You know, and so it's acceptable, you know, well, their mistake, my game, and we just, you know, if we're not careful, it'd be easy to just accept it.
Right. I remember being in college and hearing people say things like, oh, it's okay to leave a mess. They have custodial people. It gives them something to do. I mean, they have a job. In fact, and this is the kind of stuff they'd say, in fact, if it weren't for us leaving a mess, they wouldn't have a job, so we're actually kind of doing them a favor. Okay, that's called the broken windows theory of economics. It doesn't work, right? But the ideas that would you start discovering, and you know this is obvious, but when people sin and make up reasons for why they sin, often the reasons are stupid reasons. I mean, think about your own life. Think about the excuses, justifications your mind you come up with for the things you say, the things you do that are sinful, and you actually dig down and you find out, man, that was really dumb. That was a bad reason. Very rarely do we sin for good reasons. Now, yes, it's condoned in our culture. Some people say, well, they have insurance. It's fine. It'll be covered. Okay. That does not give you an excuse for what you're doing. The core issue here is not her taking something that doesn't belong to her. That is a sin. That is wrong. The core issue is that she does whatever she's afraid of what her friends think. And like I said, that will lead to other kinds of sins. When her friends are getting pressure on her to do something else, she will fall into that trap. So what I wanted to get to tonight, and this is important, is as you flip over your sheet, on the back, I want to talk about what it looks like for us to go through the process. So here are our discussion questions. Here's some of the verses we had on that. Let's talk about the issue of, okay, how would you put off, renew, and put on? The reason we did that identifying thing is not just to say, aha, I can point at your sin and I know what it is. That doesn't help. The reason we want to do that, reason we want to get to the core issue and say her problem is fear of man, is because unless you know what sin to put off, you will never be able to have success in really replacing it. Like, let's just imagine that you decided that you were going to deal with the sin of stealing from this situation. That's fine. Put off stealing, renew your mind, put on. But I submit to you that would not really help her change long term, because her main problem is not the stealing, it's the fear of man. Does that all make sense? I know I'm repeating myself, but I want to make sure we're on the same page as we go forward. Okay, so let's talk about this process of putting off, renewing, and putting on. I'm going to put the picture up here that we did, and this is the old picture here. It has all the different steps, and I'm going to back up. Let's do one at a time. So if her most significant problem really isn't stealing per se, but the fear of man, she's afraid of what others might think and how they might treat her. I might have left some blanks for you on this. I'm not sure, so I'm going to read some of my notes here to catch you up. So if she's not careful, this sin will develop into deeper and more difficult problems. She'll end up what she doesn't want to do, and things that might even hurt her, because she's afraid of what others might do or how they might make fun of her. So what does she need to confess to? Who does she need to confess to? Against whom has she sinned? How would you do the confessing and forsaking? Let's imagine this girl is sitting across from you and you're giving her advice on how to handle the situation. What would you tell her to confess? Would you just look at her like you're looking at me right now? What do I need to confess?
Fearing God instead of man.
Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah. You're giving in to the fear of man. You're afraid of what other people say. So who is that a sin against? It's a sin against God, absolutely. You're saying, God, I'm not really worried about what you think. I'm more worried about what my friends think. Yeah. Is there anything else she needs to confess?
Seems like she needs to confess. I'm not sure how to word this, but the girl, the roommate,
Yeah.
needs to confess to the roommate, apologize to her for not bringing to her attention what is right.
Yes, because when you see sin going on, and you actually, in fact, the second half of the story kind of gives it the effect that she's actually going to be partaking in this night out, so she's condoning this. And so, but she hasn't actually, that's the thing, is she hasn't actually stolen anything. She's kind of condoning it and being like, yeah, I'll be part of this group. And by not addressing it, by not saying this is wrong, she's actually sinned against her roommate. I agree with you. I would say you need to go to your roommate and say, I was wrong by not speaking up. And the roommate will probably say, no, it's no big deal. Or they might actually say, what's your problem? You say, no, I need to ask your forgiveness. I sinned against you by not.
Do that also. If she's going to confess to God, she's afraid of man rather than God. She needs to repent of it, and that's
Okay, so that's my next point, is that what is her biggest issue? She's afraid of man. So what's going to be her biggest obstacle? Confessing to her roommate, who she fears. I mean, think about what she did not want to do. She did not, but you think it's going to teach her a lesson? Absolutely. It will teach her something if she's willing, if she has to go and confess to her roommate and say, I'm sorry, I sinned against you. I need to confess this sin to you. That is a humbling experience, and that is a long way. That's a replacement. That is a long way towards, just the confessing act is a long way towards overcoming the very sin that is hobbling her spiritual growth. Very good. Anything else she needs to confess? Yes? Yeah, she probably needs to talk to somebody in authority. Like send an email to residence hall staff and say, by the way, your machine is broken. Yeah, and try to say, I was aware of this. I'm sorry. If there's someone I need to confess to, if there's someone you can repent to, or say, I'm sorry, I messed up on that. Yeah. Good point. Yeah, all those are valid. If there's any, basically the rule of thumb is if there's anyone you've sinned against, make a list. Is there anyone you sinned against by your behavior? When you gossip, that list can get very big. Go to so-and-so, and then you try to track all that down to confess. You track down everyone you talk to. So confess and forsake. What sin is she forsaking? Idolatry? Is that what you said? It's pretty good. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Yep. Yeah, idolatry, fear of man, same thing we've been saying over and over again. Again, yes, stealing sort of is part of the problem, but it's not the main issue. So, from whom does she need to ask forgiveness? We kind of already talked about this. Against whom has she sinned? We just actually dealt with that. Does she need to make any restitution? Probably not in this case. She has not really gained anything in this situation, but it depends on the details. In fact, we're going to do a whole probably 1 to 2 weeks on what restitution looks like. Restitution is paying back that which you've stolen or taken. It's Zacchaeus. He restores that which he took. But if she was taking anything, she needs to make right what she took. What would it look like to remove this sin from her life? Yep. By doing the right thing, it's removing, it is overcoming. It's the replacement of that fear. You are then fearing God. When you are willing to go to your roommate and confess that sin, you're showing you fear God more than you fear your roommate. Yeah. Anything else? Yes, Sherry. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Peace. She will have peace when she does this. Right now there's turmoil.
Repentance is a great feeling when you repent of something.
Afterwards, maybe.
Well,
it's not normally feel good when you're doing it.
when you're doing it,
Yeah.
but once you're done, you know you did it right in the eyes of God. So.
Right. And let me just tag like what Sherry said to what you said, okay? Often we chase peace, we chase good feelings. What we ought to be doing is chasing what's right, and good feelings follow behind what's right. We don't just chase what feels good, we chase what's right. And what happens is often God blesses us with good feelings or peace after we do what's right. When you have to confront sin, or when you have to make a change in your life, when you have to do something, often you do not feel peaceful about it at first. Like, if you've ever had to confront somebody over sin, I tell you, if you sit down with this girl and say, you're going to have to sit with your roommate eye to eyeball to eyeball, and you're going to have to tell her, I sinned against you by not telling you that this was wrong, she's not going to feel very peaceful when she's going into that meeting. But that doesn't matter. That doesn't mean that God is saying, oh, you don't have to do this. No. Your peace is the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, and it comes when we're being obedient to God. We obey, and then we experience God's peace. I feel like, Esther, you're going to say something?
What it's going to look like. I think it's going to look like a struggle. It's going to look like she's going to have to keep being more dependent on God. Her dependence on God, that strength is going to have to be ongoing
Yeah.
and growing.
So let me tell you something that I've done before that has, when young people are in sin, young people, so teens, and their parents don't know. Telling their parents is like the big obstacle. It's like it's been in the dark, it's been in the shadows. Their parents aren't aware, or they at least they don't think their parents are aware. Sometimes the parents are aware, but they're hiding something. And the biggest obstacle for them to overcome is having to meet their parents eye to eye and say, I've been sinning against you, I've been lying to you, I've actually been doing this, I've been doing instead of what I told you, or whatever. Now, what I've offered to do sometimes, and this has been very effective, is I'll say, look, I will go with you when you talk to your parent. Or Jenna will say, I will go with you and sit with you when you speak to your mom or your dad. So there's a companion, there's also accountability. But the other thing you say is, if you don't do this within a couple weeks, I'll be talking to him. So there's that extra little bit of accountability of, this is a serious issue that needs to be dealt with, and there's a little bit, and you will have to almost do this to help them towards growth. People don't always do the right thing. People need to be encouraged towards righteousness. Does that make sense? You see what I'm saying? I'm not saying be mean, but I'm saying sometimes when you're helping someone and they don't want to do what's right, you have to help them towards righteousness, and even going with them, being a companion with them, taking them to, checking in on them, things like that, asking hard questions. Tony?
Well, I was just going to say it could very well fracture her relationship with her friends. In
Yeah.
which case, it might not necessarily feel good up front, but there is a restoration with your relationship with God that
Yep.
ultimately will.
Yeah, and so what Tony said is that there is probably a fracturing of your relationship with your roommate that will happen if you go to that person and confess and ask forgiveness. However, there is a restoration with your relationship with God, which is far more important. Also, you'll note that as you do what's right, you'll attract better friends. And the friends who are pulling you down will leave you. In fact, many people will say something like, when they got saved and they were worried about all their friends, I said, they didn't have to worry about leaving my friends left me. The bad friends will leave if you're doing what's right. So anyway, it's kind of can get sticky with a roommate situation because that's not always like, you're not always you're sometimes stuck together, assigned together, but we're going to move on from that. Let's talk about, we talked about radical removal. Oh, the question, what radical things might she need to do to ensure this is not a problem in the future? What kind of radical change does she need to make? Can you think of one or two things she could do?
Find new friends if they're going to keep doing the same thing.
Yeah.
They're going to drag her back in.
So we all have weaknesses. We all have our own weaknesses that we are more susceptible to certain sins than others. And you need to make it hard for you to sin in those areas. So some of you might really struggle with gambling. Like it might be that when you go by a gas station, you see a lottery sign in the window that you have a very, very hard time saying no to that. I don't know. I've not counseled anybody in this room on gambling, but let's just say that maybe that's a sin. That's not a sin I really struggle with. I have never really got sweaty palms looking at a lottery ticket, but I know people do. So what I'm saying is that for me, it doesn't bother me at all to go into QT and then pay for my gas inside. Maybe someone who struggles with that, you say, you don't go into a gas station, you pay at the pump, and you never go inside to get a hot dog or a can of Coke. You never go inside. You don't ever make it hard to sin and easy to do right. Right? So maybe there are things you do like that might seem legalistic to somebody on the outside, but what they're doing is they're protecting your heart from the natural weaknesses that you have. Now, you don't force that rule on somebody else. Let's just say I have a gambling sensitivity, and so I say, well, I never go inside gas stations because there's gambling, there's lottery tickets in there, and I can't handle that. So I'm with Tony, and Tony says, well, I'm going to go inside and grab a hot dog. Do you mind if and I'm like, I thought you were a Christian. How could you go inside, And that is wrong of me to then put my restrictions on him. You see? So I'm not saying that restriction equals righteousness. I'm just saying that for sometimes when it comes to radical removal of sin from our lives, we have to do what's radical. We have to do something. Maybe you don't need the internet in your home. Maybe you don't need a Dish Network. Maybe you don't need, pick something. Maybe you don't take a different route home from work. I don't know. Whatever your particular weakness is, maybe you need to consider whether or not, if you have alcoholism in your past, do you really need to cook with alcohol? Do you have it in the house? Is that really what you want to be doing? Okay, I think I've made my point there. But for her, there's all kinds of things you could do. I think talking about it, being being aware, having a close accountability partner who's asking her hard questions is a good first step. So the questions are, the renewal question, what does God's word say about this? What about God's character should motivate me towards righteousness? What scripture do you remember from last week would you recommend this girl study, memorize, have on the tip of her tongue?
Romans, do not be conformed to this world.
Romans 12, 1 and 2.
Be
Good.
transformed.
Good. It's good. Yes. That's a great passage of Scripture. It's in Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. No one can serve two masters. Either he will love the one and hate the other, or he'll be loyal to the one and despise the other.
Exodus 20, go over the Ten Commandments again.
Exodus 20, always a good place to go. Two of my favorite verses on fear of man, Proverbs 29:25. Proverbs 29:25 says, the fear of man brings a snare, but whoso trusts in the Lord will be safe. Proverbs 29:25. Galatians 1:10. Galatians 1:10 says, for do I now persuade men or God, or do I seek to please men? For if I sought to please men, I would not be a bondservant of Christ. So Galatians 1:10, Matthew 6:24, Proverbs 29:25, and a bunch of verses in Proverbs that talk about the fear of the Lord would be a good place to go as well. So what replaces the fear of man? Fear of God, right? Everybody knows that. Fear of God. So fear is what you orient your life around. If you fear God, you orient your life to him. Fear man, you orient your life to what others think. We are to be fearing God, not fearing man. Jesus says as much. He says, why do you fear man? The worst he can do is kill you. I always thought that was kind of humorous. Jesus is saying, oh, come on, you don't fear death, do you? No, fear the one who can put your body and soul in hell. So fear of God, okay, so rather than be concerned about what other people might think, you become concerned about what God thinks about your choices. Accountability is important as well. Accountability just means getting someone to help you remember. I think these kind of sins really fester in the darkness, fester when no one knows. If you are open with a couple people who love you, it's important, who love you and want what's best for you, and can hold some sort of spiritual authority over you, this is very helpful. Notice what I'm saying. You're not accountable to someone who is just your equal or peer. Don't just become accountable with somebody who's going to commiserate with you. Become accountable to someone who has some spiritual, a deacon, a pastor, a Sunday school teacher, someone who loves you, who has your best interest in mind, and can have some spiritual authority over you, can challenge you in some areas. Okay, you always can find someone. If you don't know anybody like that, I can find somebody for you. Okay, any questions on this case study? Does that kind of make sense? You see how we go through? We find what the root issue is, and we try to replace that versus just saying, oh, you struggled with stealing. Let's just not steal anymore. Any questions or comments? Oh, I see here's a hand over here. Oh, yes, I couldn't see you there, Charles. Yes, sir.
Did I understand the story line that she pushed the button on the Coke machine and the Coke came out?
Her roommate did that, yeah. Yeah, so she pushed the button, the Coke comes out, never paid for it, push the button again, Coke comes out. Like the first time you do it, but if you keep doing it, and then we kind of ump the ante with them getting coolers and trying to sell it. So it's kind of, if you could excuse the first couple actions, it's kind of hard to excuse that point. You really ought to pay it back, yeah. Absolutely.
So I was thinking, today's proverb, the proverb today is, a good name is to be chosen right.
Ah,
And something that I think I've heard about is lack of personal integrity and honor. And I was thinking of some of the golf players who turn themselves
they call penalties on themselves, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is slightly different in that she hears of this happening, and she doesn't actually do it, so she doesn't have to reimburse. Her roommate should, absolutely. And so we're trying to, but that's a really good point. A good name is to be chosen, and that is an excellent verse to look at. Absolutely. Yes, sir. Our integrity, yeah. That's very true. Very true. Could you black the screen real quick? I'm going to switch PowerPoints here. Let's do one more quick one, and we will see what we can get done here. And I would like to, Doug, can you and Pat hand these out to people if you don't mind? It's just the second page of what you had from this week. It's one more case study. It's very similar format, slightly different emphasis here. And again, this is, hopefully it'll go up on the screen here. Having a little trouble. All right, so in case you're getting it now, I'm just going to go ahead and read this case study to you, and we're going to have some questions to talk through, and who knows if we can get at least started on this. We're not going to take too long. Again, this is written first person. Actually, this is another female. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Just put them right here. All right, what a long day. I'm so sick of school right now. Before I came this semester, everyone warned me that being a freshman meant having to pick and choose which assignments to finish, but I had no idea things would be this hard, and so many of my assignments would end up not getting done. I need a break, seriously. Most of the people in my 230 are skipping class this time of year anyway, so no worries. I'll learn what I need before the exam. When I get to my dorm room, Linda is there, but she isn't on the couch, so I drop my books at the door and claim it right away. I pull out my phone and catch up on season 4 of the Superhero Villain School. I can't believe how far behind I am on these shows. They just keep piling up. I watched some of my old favorites, Star Battles, Real Home and Garden, and of course Bachelorettes from Space, before I remember that my friend had mentioned a sports documentary I needed to watch. Okay, what do you know? What do you catch? What do you see right off the bat from this? What is the fruit you're observing in this particular case study? Priorities. Disobedience. In what way?
He's not doing what he should be doing.
Okay.
Schoolwork comes, he's at school for a reason.
Yeah, this person's at school for a reason, and they are not doing what they should be doing. Okay? Yeah, my PowerPoint's not coming up. Sorry. We'll just work from this. What else? What's that? Slothfulness. That's a good word for you. Being lazy. But they're working so hard to catch up on all these TV shows. Okay, this is taken from real life, okay? So, not from me, but not from me. In my working with college students, I noticed that many of them talk about watching television like it's work. I really am behind on season 4 of such and such. You're behind? Listen, if you don't talk this way, you know people who do. I've got to catch up. Why? I know a lot of times I used to say, you know this is pretend, right? You know it's all pretend. Your work at school is real, but these imaginary worlds on your phone or on your iPad are pretend. Okay, so there's some escapism going on. There's an avoiding of responsibility. There's slothfulness. Anything else? Complaining. Yeah, a real complaining spirit. A very negative spirit about demands being put on her. This is a female in this situation. Demands being put on her life that she doesn't want. Okay? Okay. Do you notice this? Okay, look at paragraph 2. When I get to my dorm room, Linda is there, but she isn't on the couch, so I drop my books at the door and claim it right away. Okay. That's selfishness. I don't know if you could catch that, but first thought is, oh, good, she's not on the couch, so it's mine. Not asking about how her roommate's day was, not concerned about her roommate, all she's thinking about is herself. And immediately on the phone. Okay? Any other red flags or fruit things you see here that are... You see this at work? Yeah, I mean, people do. People do anything to avoid real work. I was at Winthrop, because I worked with the college students quite a bit, and I still remember walking through Diggs, which is their student center, and I could not believe it. It was exam week, and I counted like 10 students, maybe more, who had their computers up with their notes and their books out on their desk like they were studying. But in their lap was an iPad, and they're watching television. And tons of them were doing this. I say television. It's their streaming. Netflix is what they're doing. But you think about, this is a real challenge. Don't overlook this, those of us who are a little bit beyond. I didn't have to struggle with this in college. This was never a temptation because it wasn't around. And I'm really grateful for that. I don't think I could have survived with that kind of temptation, honestly. I think I would have really had a struggle. It's a real struggle for a lot of these students to be able to discipline themselves when so many temptations are right there at a snap of a finger. They could easily waste hours. And there's a false sense of accomplishment when they finish things, when they complete seasons of television shows. Yes, Charles.
Taking too much of the guys, I finally got
Or video games, yeah. Yeah, there are guys similar. I had a friend in college who played enormous video games. I'm talking 100-hour video games throughout a semester. And he was surprised at the end of the semester when he was failing. I wasn't surprised. But I think that a lot of lying to herself, self-deception is a big thing here. Self-deception is huge. She says, before I came, everyone warned me that being a freshman meant having to pick or choose which assignments to finish, but I had no idea things would be this hard and so many of my assignments would not end up being done. Notice how passive that is? I did that on purpose. My assignments weren't getting done. Not I didn't do my assignments. It's they weren't getting done. Do you notice that? Okay, so people who talk this way are passing the buck. She is blaming others for her own problems. When we start using passive terms, we do the same thing. Yeah, Jake?
I don't know if this is really worth anything, but in the first paragraph it talks about, she says that most of the people in her Q30 class were skipping, so she kind of do it, hit the ground to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something that's worth mentioning as well.
She's just following the...
Yeah, I mean, like if everyone else can do it, then she can do it too.
Yeah, I saw that as more of like a blame shifting and like saying, well, I'm not so bad. I mean, comparing herself with other people. Hey, I mean, everybody else is doing it. It must be all right. I'll be fine. I'll just learn what I need to learn before the exam. I remember being at Clemson as a freshman and sitting in the library towards exam time with a couple guys, and I remember I could not believe it. I was sitting with a guy who worked at Starbucks, and this will be the last thing and we'll go. And so he showed up to study for our math exam. Or we were taking calculus, and he came there and he had 2 gallon jugs of coffee from Starbucks that he had kind of taken from. They said, "Oh, they let me take it. It's okay." He got boom, 2 big. I'm like, "What is that?" It was nasty, cold coffee. Like it was not even hot anymore. And then he was just obsessed with, okay, I got to learn all this stuff because he had been skipping class like the whole semester. And then he was like, yeah, and he pulled out of his jacket pocket and he had bought some Ritalin from somebody. And he was like popping Ritalin pills that he had bought from a friend. And I'm like, this is insane. But here's a guy who, and this is a little bit of the inspiration for this as well, where a person who just said, no, I'm gonna eventually be fine. I'll eventually be fine. I'm gonna pleasure myself now. I'm gonna delay. I'm not gonna work because I can always work later. It's postponing hard work and pleasure now. That is immaturity. That is you're never going to grow spiritually if that's your mindset. And this is, I know, kind of a little bit humorous, but it is so much the response of many of us Christians as well, spiritually speaking. We do the same thing. So next time we get together, what we'll do is we'll handle this exact thing. We'll talk again. We'll remind ourselves of where we are, and then we'll track it through that tree as if you're helping this person. You're sitting down. You're saying, okay, what do you need to put off? What do you need to confess? What do you need to replace? And how do you think about this and relate? It's not just, let me put it this way and we'll close. It's not just a matter of bad habits. Okay, this is a spiritual issue with this person. This is not just like I have bad habits, I got to replace my bad habits with good habits. No. This is a spiritual issue, and we've got to get to the bottom of that as we go forward. Father, thank you so much for showing us your truth in your word. I pray you would help us to help others with what you've taught us.